Biden continued in that speech yesterday, and he's warning us. You remember about 2 months ago when for a month he warned us that there was going to be a war coming with Russia and Ukraine? Now he's warning us about food shortages. Here we go.
Nothing more to report. With regard to food shortages, yes, we did talk about food shortages. And it's going to be real. The price of these sanctions is not just imposed upon Russia. It's imposed upon an awful lot of countries as well, including European countries and our country as well.
So the sanctions are going to cause us and the Europeans to have food shortages. Liz, were we promised that a couple weeks ago when this thing started? I don't remember anything about food shortages right here at home. I mean, we're having shortages of everything else, so I guess we should have expected it, but I don't remember that.
Well, I think there's a couple things. I mean, I myself was waiting during this speech for Biden to mention whether his transportation secretary, Buttigieg, was actually back to his job, whether he was going to address the supply chain crisis that we've been experiencing that does lead to food shortages. The other reason, this is true, right? Everyone who goes to a grocery store, which means not Joe Biden, understands that prices have been hiked really high. I mean, a gallon of milk is a lot more expensive. Diapers, I buy diapers for my daughter. They're a lot more expensive. This is a real thing that we're dealing with. And the reason is it's not just arbitrary. It's not just happening. It's happening because of deliberate political decisions that Joe Biden has made, whether it's spending, which leads to inflation, whether it's not addressing the supply chain crisis, whether it's environmental policies that have hurt our farmers across the country, that have either driven prices up or driven the supply down. This is Joe Biden being out of touch once again. And I'm excited in a sense to see how this plays out in the midterms because people are hurting and he's just being flippant about it.
Carol, I want to focus on one word that Liz said right there, deliberate, because all week I did shows this whole week. Basically, my argument at this point is that this is deliberate. I think that they actually do want these supply chain issues. I think they want food shortages. I think they want high gas prices. They are trying to usher in, his words, a new world order, and you'd have to collapse the system and make everyone think this thing doesn't work. So when people say that, oh no, they're just bad at what they do, it's like, no, they're actually quite good at it. What do you think about that?
I don't know. The problem with that, and I get why that could be a theory of what's happening because everything makes no sense. But the problem with that is at the end of that, who chooses like the Biden administration or Democrats in general to lead the way on this new world order when everything has collapsed around them? I think one of the things is that we don't hear from Joe Biden that often. And when we do hear from them, it's always like winter of despair is coming. It's like, it's never like, don't worry, I'm going to make things better for everybody. It's always like, prepare for the worst. We're all going to die. So I don't really know why that's the strategy that his administration has come up with for when we do see the president. He's always there to deliver the worst possible news to us. I think food shortages are coming. I don't think they have anything to do with the war in Russia. I think people have been predicting these food shortages for a while. I think we're seeing in stores a lack of supply. It completely comes back to this administration being inept and not caring that this is affecting people on a very day-to-day basis. And it just, they're the world of, the delayed treadmill, et cetera. They have no idea of what's really happening out there in America.
Yeah, by the way, congratulations to you guys for surviving the winter of death. And Michael Knowles had a great point. We went from the winter of death to now the spring of food shortages. It's just incredible the way they use fear, but that's pretty much all they got at this point, right, Liz?
Yeah, certainly. I mean, it's emotional manipulation. It's emotional blackmail. I think that the threats for the spring aren't going to be quite as frightening to people as the threats of COVID. But this is what they do. I mean, think about how they act on climate change. They tell us in 11 years, or I guess it's 10 years, but you haven't noticed that they changed their talking points, which is interesting. They're still saying 11 years, 3 years in a row. In 11 years, the world is going to end if we don't stop eating red meat and stop using airplanes, and if we don't sacrifice our souls on the altar of socialism here. They do the same thing with COVID. If we don't give away our freedoms, then you will die and you will be killing grandma. Now, you're not going to have food for your family if you don't let the Democrats turn our country into a Marxist state. I mean, at some point they're going to have adrenal burnout syndrome, I would think, just from this constant hyping. But I don't know. I would hope that the American people at some point would realize, listen, these predictions are not coming true. These predictions are inaccurate. It is fear-mongering, and I do think it's a deliberate strategy. I do think that you are correct when you say that it's a deliberate strategy because in order to usher in the the America that they want or the governing system of our country that they want, a socialist, communist, Marxist system, they have to destroy our institutions first. This is classic critical theory. This is Marxism. And so they know that this is a part of conditioning the public to do that.
Karol, which would you say is worse? If it's deliberate or not deliberate, which is actually worse? I mean, if it's deliberate, then it feels like, oh, we can fight it because we know there's something direct to point at. I mean, if it's complete ineptitude, I'll pretend that sounds right. Like, that's much scarier in a way, right?
Right. Well, that's exactly it. I'm not sure which the conspiracy theory is at this point, but no, I think it is the ineptitude. I think this administration has no idea what's going on, and they're just completely out of touch. I remember, Joe Biden going on vacation as the Afghanistan thing fell apart, and it's just like, how do you do that? How do you go home to Delaware when Americans are dying in a country that we've been in for so long, and you pulled out haphazardly and really didn't care about them? And so, Liz said that she hopes Americans see through what's going on. And I really do think Americans have gotten very savvy and that they understand a lot more than they say used to. And they're able to see the angles in a way that they hadn't maybe in the past. I think they see this administration for what it is. I think they know that things are going badly, and it's the direct result of this administration and their policies. Whether or not that's intentional is a separate issue. But I think Americans really do know where this begins and ends.
Oh, I hope you are right.